Have you today?
Hey, Chief. Hey, Paul.
We would like to call the Audit Committee meeting of April 19, 2007 to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and posted in compliance with the open meeting law. I would like to welcome and announce the newly appointed member of our Audit Oversight Committee, Councilman Steve Wilson, who replaces former Councilman Lawrence Weekly. We would also like to excuse Councilman Wolfen due to a conflict with a previous commitment. At this time, we would like to seek approval of the final minutes for the November 21, 2006 Audit Committee meeting. Are there any corrections or additions? If not, I will entertain a motion for approval.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
At this time, we would like to bring before the Audit Committee the discussion and possible action on the appointment of the chairperson and vice chairperson for calendar year 2007. This is required at the first meeting of the calendar year according to our bylaws. Is there any discussion on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to nominate you again to serve in that chairman's role.
I immediately second that.
And the third?
The fourth extension.
He's happy about that.
Do the department heads have a vote in this?
I was looking at all their eyebrows and they didn't go down. But I couldn't tell about Marcus first, but I think he's okay.
All right.
We'll just ask all those sitting down indicate their approval.
All right. It's been
unanimous.
It's been moved and approved, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I
Make a
appreciate
motion
it.
for the vice chairman to
Please.
be Councilman Brown, as it has been under his able leadership. Would love to continue that.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And quite frankly, I appreciate Councilman Brown and the addition and compliment that he has been to this audit committee since he has been here. We will now hear a general report from the city auditor. Mr. Snowden.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, currently the following audits or projects are in process. The City Manager Office Video Services is being, the lead auditor on that particular one is Brian Smith, and it's in the field work stage. Human Resources, Personnel Services, Information Systems and Records is on hold. Nancy Beatty is the auditor in charge of that. The reason that's on hold is I have pretty much a policy that says that I really don't want auditors working on more than 2 audits at one time. So she has 2 that are open right now. In finance, accounting, dealing with travel, Philip Marmorowski is the lead auditor on that, and it's in the planning phase. Building and safety, the permits division, Nancy Beatty is the lead auditor on that, and it's in the reporting stage also, or is in the reporting stage. Fire and rescue, fire prevention investigation, Nancy Beatty is working on that when it's in the planning stage. Credit card receipting, Bill Simo's the lead auditor on that. It's on hold. We're awaiting some additional work to be done by someone on the outside, and then we'll recommence on that. Citywide software, Philip Marmorowski is working on that one. That one's currently on hold. Philip has 2 audits that will be reviewed today, and so that one will be coming off of hold shortly. In addition, we have 4 investigations in progress. Gary Phillips is the auditor that's working on that. Those are 4 in process at this point, and we've had 2 control reviews that have been completed and issued. Just as a side note, I would like to invite the committee members down to our offices have been relocated off of the 3rd floor down to the plaza level. We have a little bit more room, more than a little bit more room, but we'd invite you to come down there and
Well, that's the issue that I have with the third floor. I knock on the door and no one would answer.
Well, do they have cameras there now? Security cameras to see who's knocking on the door?
Well, we actually have someone there watching to see who comes in as acting as a receptionist, so you can get some response from us now. But I would invite you to come down and look at our new office space. And that concludes my report.
I do have a general observation here, and that has to do with each of the members of your team there, and the appreciation that I've had throughout the years, being a distant part, if you will, peripheral part, working with them, and quality, and to me, the inspiration they bring to the city organization, and I compliment you on your leadership with them. Thank you very much. Item 6 on the agenda, report and possible action on the quantification of savings related to the implementation of audit reports. Mr. Snelling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee at the last meeting directed the City Auditor's Office to begin reporting to the committee the identified monetary savings as a result of implementation of proposed recommendations. An effort of this type was performed in 2001, and currently we're in the process of identifying those savings for subsequent audits. What we intend to bring back to the committee are identified monetary savings in various categories. First one is a hard dollar savings, second are soft dollar savings, and then third would be an area where savings are probable but not easily determined, and finally an intrinsic improvements where specific savings can't be identified. At the next audit committee meeting, we'll present a pro forma report to see if that meets your expectations. And that concludes my report on this matter.
General question on that. Would that report also be made available to our outside auditors for the city?
Yes, we will. We will do that.
It just appears to me that, and I may be mistaken, Mr. Vinson, but it appears to me that this is a compliment as well to the city. And from other experiences, I believe it might even warrant a footnote representation on what the city has accomplished. And it's a very positive. So it's for that consideration. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Do we have any further comments with respect to this agenda item? Okay. I would move or entertain a motion to accept this report. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Item agenda 7, discussion and possible action on audit of Metropolitan Police funding. Mr. Snelling, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The audit of the Metropolitan Police funding, the objective of this audit was to provide a review of the funding formula utilized by Metro in assigning the portions of the budget to be paid by the various governmental entities within Clark County. When we started this audit, we met with the representatives from Metro and gathered some preliminary data. Prior to our commencing field work, Metro representatives asked us or stated that they would like to have Clark County to be involved in the audit, hoping to alleviate any conflict should the audit determine that either the county or the city paid a disproportionate share. Previously, I contacted Jerry Carroll, the county auditor, and he stated that the county would like to participate in an audit and suggested that we contact, and I suggest that we contact an independent audit firm to provide the services. The independent audit firm would be given an audit program developed by the county auditor and the city auditor, and the fee for the audit would be paid by the city and the county. At the last meeting, we talked about this. Well, then the committee suggested that asked that I contact the county once again to find out if they still were interested in performing that audit. I talked to Jerry Carroll as recently as yesterday, and he said that they were interested and that they would, in fact, he was going to check with their finance people to find out if they had funds available that they could participate in that audit. And so as we move forward with that, as soon as I hear something from them, I'll report back what his final determination was, and then we can begin looking at that possibility. The one thing I would say is that I'm not sure that I'll have enough budget in order to cover that particular audit with the contracting side of it, and if that's the case, well, then I'll let you know, and we may have to do something a little bit different.
Is there an estimate on?
No, not at this time. I don't know.
Will this be an RFP?
It'll be an RFP. That would be my intention, is to release it as an RFP and then go through that process.
And does this require approval that this committee does not agree to? I guess what I'm asking is this something that we need to go back to the city manager's office or to Mr. Benson's department?
It would depend upon what the cost is going to be. It's going to drive what our actual requirements are as far as what we would have to do. So we're going to have to get to the point where we know we have an estimate of that. My guess is it's going to have to go back.
Okay, we don't. From my view here, we don't want to approve the budget until we know that it's approved through the proper channels.
True that. I think this is the first step in finding out. First of all, finding out if the county is willing to participate. And if the county is willing to participate, I think Metro is definitely willing to participate and not going to argue with us. The next question is working out what the audit plan would actually be, so we can get some kind of a determination as to how much effort it's going to take. And based on that, I think we may be in a position then to make some estimates as to what the price is going to be. And what I will do, I'll commit to you that for sure that as we move along on that process, well, then I'll keep the committee informed.
Is there a possibility, Brad, before the RFP that you could prepare a budget of what you believe the hours will take?
Yes.
For an outside person to conduct the audit, or an outside firm?
Yes. And would you like that? Would you like the committee to see that? Okay.
And I need to put on the record before we entertain any motions here. I am the campaign treasurer for the sheriff. I just want to make sure I don't have a conflict with any matter that comes before this committee as it relates to any audits on Metro. I've raised this before, and I just want to keep it in front of us so that if someone feels there is a conflict, at least disclosed on the relationship.
So I think disclosure at this time, I don't think it would be effective refreshment. But as we move along, we can address it further.
Is there a motion to be entertained at this time, or is this a calendar item to be continued to a future date, agenda item?
Should we make a motion to study and to go forward if they get back and we have a firm amount? Can we make the motion to pursue it to the next level, which would be go to the governing authority and get it done, so we don't have to wait?
I think I'm a little sensitive that we need to have this as an agenda item in front of us once again, so we know where the city's or the county's participation will be, what the costs are that are associated with this, and where the funding will be coming from before we approve and authorize.
Then could I make a suggestion that you accept the report and with the instruction, with giving the city auditor the instructions to proceed forward to the point where it's brought back to the committee to further review?
I would make that motion.
If I may.
So basically, you would be giving direction
To me,
come back.
to come back to proceed to gather some more information and come back and make a report.
To get a sense of the scope of the work and the cost involved, but let's see if we can just revisit, I think, what initiated this agenda items. The funding formula has, the last few years, is Mark here? Yes. The last few years, the city's done pretty well with the funding formula, but depending on how it balances out, that swings anywhere from $500,000 up over $1 million and impacts the budget. So I think what initiated the discussion on this item was to have city and the county audit take a look at it to get a comfort level that the formula is in place, it works, it's consistent in how they finalize those numbers. Is that how you remember it?
Yeah, for the record, Mark Vincent, Finance and Business Services. The formula, of course, is set by NRS, and it is a little complicated, and it does rely on statistical information, primarily calls for service, felony arrests, those kinds of statistics in the determination of the share of the budget. So you've got two things going on. One, you have is the proper jurisdiction being credited for that call for service of that felony, which can be problematic when you're on a street that's a border. So you get that issue. And the secondary issue is that the reason why that's important is those different factors are applied to different portions of Metro's budget. Some may be growing faster than others. So the changing demographics in the statistics applied to the changing growth patterns in the Metro budget produce different results. But of the last 4 years, it's been such that the statistics have been in our favor. Our populations aren't growing as fast. We're having fewer felony crimes. And so we have been getting less than, our percentage has shrunk almost 4 percentage points in the last 7 years.
So it's, you could say, well, things are going well, let's abandon this effort. At the same time, I think it's important to be able to verify the process that's in place. And I think an outcome of the scope of work that's done may actually give the city and the county a time. And I'm not sure when this last was looked at from the state level as far as the statute itself, but it might be time after this report and the body of works provided to take a look at it and see if it's still the appropriate way to work that funding formula.
Mr. Chairman, one other comment about the when we started, we did the preliminary work on the audit. One of the questions we had was the actual data integrity. So that's going to be one thing we would like for them to look at also, whoever we have come in and do that.
There's a motion. Is there a second? In favor?
Aye.
We'll hear a report now on possible action on the status of legal action related to misuse of a purchase card, P-card, in the Information Technologies Department.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last Audit Committee meeting, while we were reviewing the Internal Control Review Activity Report for June 30th, 2006, you asked the status of legal proceedings related to the misuse of a P-card in the IT department. The defendant in this case was prosecuted in district court. She was adjudged guilty, and she was ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $6,513.60. She was sentenced to a maximum of 30 months, and the sentence was suspended, and she was placed on probation. And that concludes my report.
Any discussion on this?
Has there been any restitution made, do you know?
She had the actual conditions of her probation said that she had to pay restitution of that amount in monthly installments of $297 within the first 22 months. So if she's not doing that, well, then she can have her probation revoked.
Thank you.
So I believe she has. I have not. Well, no, Gary has talked to them, and we are receiving that. I know that for a fact because I did ask him that question.
Excellent. Any further discussion? I would accept a motion on this report.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda item 9, report and possible action on the status of the implementation of recommendations and delivery of the same to the city auditor's office. Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last Audit Committee meeting, while we were reviewing the audit of the single-family residential rehabilitation program, you asked Steve Harson, the Director of the Neighborhood Services Department, to deliver documentation related to the implementation of recommendations to the City Auditor's Office. Mr. Harson did, in fact, deliver those the documentation as requested in the specified time period. And so we did get what which we asked for, and that is complete. That concludes my report.
And what was the substance of?
All of the recommendations were accepted, and all the issues were implemented as requested.
Excellent. Any further discussion on this matter? I would entertain a motion.
Move to accept.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item agenda 10, report and possible action on Durango Hills Golf Course Management Contract, sales tax collection and remittance. Mr. Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last audit committee meeting, while we were reviewing open audit recommendations, we noted that this item was being addressed by the City Attorney's Office. You requested John Redline of the City Attorney's Office to report on the status of the issue at the next meeting. Although Mr. Redline is out of the city at this time, why then Terry Ponicello, I believe, is here and available and ready to give that report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, Mr. Redline apologizes that he couldn't be here at this morning's meeting. He sends a note over that he is attending the important International Nerd Convention, also known as International Municipal Lawyers Association in Washington, D.C. So he asked me to fill in for him on these items on Durango Hills. On item number 10, I guess at the last audit committee meeting, you had asked Mr. Redline to pursue the options that were going to be available to have the IRI $100,000 overpayment reimbursed to them. And apparently he did work with IRI, and at the city's direction, IRI made a request from the state, sent a written request to the state, and to no avail, the state refused to make payment. So at this point in time, from the city's perspective, Mr. Redline has stated that there's two options available. One, either he can possibly sue IRI on that overpayment, and the other direction is that he needs to research a little further, is to have the city directly sue the state for the overpayment, which is a little different position because the city did not make the payment, it was IRI. But contractually, we would benefit as the beneficiary of our operator contract. So that's where he's at right now. What he'd like to do is do a little further research on those legal remedies and report back to you, because that would take a decision for management to take those actions. And he would like to at least be able to go over for the amount of money that's involved and the recovery costs involved. It would be a decision that would have to be made by management / audit committee.
Correct me if I'm misstating what I'm about to say here. I think the issue is in front of us. I believe that the issue has been addressed and is being addressed by City Council. I believe this is an issue now that should be left to City Council to determine what avenue should be pursued. And it's not our direction or recommendation to direct City Council whether they should or should not be suing anybody. I think you've identified the issue's in front of us. We're aware of what the issue is, and I believe the city auditors have gone as far as, from my perspective, my understanding, in identifying this matter. And I believe we should close it at our end and turn this matter over to the appropriate department within the city, which is legal, and let them make the determination here whether or not it is or is not a pursuable.
Mr. Chairman, I think our concern was to find out what the legal status was on this particular recommendation, which the City Attorney's Office did or is in the process of doing. I think the recommendation that they would make would probably go either to the city manager or could go all the way to the City Council. I think maybe I would look at our responsibility and the committee's responsibility is maybe making a recommendation on what we might think or not making a recommendation and allowing whatever the city attorney recommends to be our course of action.
And I don't feel like we're in a position as a committee to assess risk benefit when it relates to legal proceedings. I believe that's best left with the city attorney's office, at least from my view, as I'm viewing this. What I do find that we need to draw attention to through the city auditor's office is the city being unfortunately burdened with reimbursement of unnecessary sales and use tax that's being passed on, where maybe the contract is appropriately written that sales tax should not, or use tax should not be charged. And I think that the city auditors have identified this issue. I know from previous meetings where both city manager's office and finance have both indicated that they do review and they do seek to avoid those issues from arising. I would entertain a motion at this time, unless there's further discussion here, that we accept the report and that this matter be deferred to city attorney's office for the city attorneys to make the determination as to the propriety of what next needs to happen.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda item 11, report and possible action on Durango Hills Golf Course Management Contract, sales tax for purchases. Mr. Snelling?
Yes, this is, there's 3 issues related to this. This is the second issue dealing with sales tax for purchases. And once again, Terry Ponticello is here to address that.
Mr. Redline has reported that he has contacted the Attorney General's office directly on this issue of the sales tax exemption. Explained the situation not only in relation to Durango Hills, but in other contractual areas, primarily contractors that we hire out there, and that the city is the ultimate owner of the property materials that are being purchased. On approaching the Attorney General's office, it was interesting that they don't have this issue, have never had this issue before them, so it was an unsettled area. And what they're doing at this time is working with the State Department of Taxation, and will be responding directly to Mr. Redline on this issue. So he thought that was interesting. He thought that there was some headway made in contacting the Attorney General's office on this particular issue. So that was, at that point, I think as soon as he hears back from the Attorney General's office, we'll be able to report back to the audit committee.
Mr. Snelling?
I think that's positive. I think there's a possibility that when it comes to the sales tax purchases, that the city's sales tax exemption status may very well be protected in this case, and even though in this case with IRI, that sales tax may not have to be paid. So I think that is positive.
Okay. And again, to be slightly redundant here, I believe the issue has been addressed. I believe, this is beyond the scope of the audit committee with respect to how this is pursued. I believe that, if I'm incorrect, or someone please correct me, I believe it's in the appropriate hands within the city, and that this report should be, from my perspective, unless there's other discussion, accepted as provided, and leave the matter now to I would believe with both city attorney's office as well as the other department heads that this now applies to.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item agenda 12, report and possible action on Durango Hills Golf Course Management Contract Property Tax. Mr. Snelling?
Mr. Chairman, this is the third of the 3 issues related to the Durango Hills Golf Course Management Contract that has to do with property tax. Terry Ponticello is, I believe, prepared to make a presentation on this one also.
Thank you. Our office has done considerable research in this area, where in essence we were at odds with the initial opinion that we had received from the county on the sales tax, the property tax issue. And since the last meeting, it looks like Mr. Redline contacted the district attorney's office and at least, again, has gotten their attention on this matter, as well as providing them the case law that we have researched to explain to them the distinction that they see that this is not a lease, as they are led to believe, and therefore the real estate taxes the exemption should be gone. So at this point in time, once again, he is working with the district attorney's office, hoping that they will see some light in that, if in fact that they don't reconsider this issue, we'll have to go to the further option of seeking perhaps a legal remedy of challenging the county in their assessment of this particular type of contract.
Mr. Snowden, further comment?
I'm sorry.
Further comment?
On this particular issue, no additional comment. I would mention one thing about the three issues, all three issues. Each one of these three issues, although you may not ask the city attorney's office to come back and make a further report, well, then they will still remain as incomplete items on the follow-up until there's been some type of a resolution to these issues. So
That would be my understanding.
yeah, they would be coming back until we do have a resolution on them.
And my perspective to this, in addition, is it's not just Durango Hills that's an issue. It's other contracts as well that involve the city. And once this is resolved, my impression is this could be resolved favorably for potential other contracts that we're not aware of. And so it does arise in another audit. It's just another feather in your quiver, so to speak, that it's been addressed. And it can be brought to the attention of appropriate parties, if need be, for resolution. Is there any further discussion on this agenda?
I would make a motion to accept the report.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. I have to apologize to everyone. This is the fastest we've moved through agenda items. It's also the quietest that Mr. Brown has been.
Well, we're to
So-
number 13.
That's why I'm saying this.
I think he was saving up for some.
That's.
I got to my part. That's why they put them at the end of the agenda.
Yeah, that's right.
Forget.
Item 13, report and possible action on parking and enforcement and collections, delinquent parking citation collection program, 1999 outstanding balance. Mr. Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last audit committee meeting, while we were reviewing open audit recommendations, we noted this item, and the committee asked for a status of the collection of the 1999 outstanding balance. Mark Vincent, Director of Finance and Business Services, stated he would return and report on that at our next meeting. Mr. Vincent is present, and he will make that report at this time.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Vincent again for the record. This is sort of a bad news, good news kind of report, but it is what it is. So put this in a little bit of perspective. When we brought the Cardinal system up in about September of '04, we were replacing a rather old legacy system that, and some rather, frankly, archaic collection practices that we had. And the idea was that we would have a new system that provided better information and that we would be better able to collect on these amounts. I can tell you that as we sit here today, there is approximately $20 million. There's $19,977,000 in outstanding parking fines plus penalties. Most of that's penalties. I'll tell you that about 60%, probably over 60% of that's penalties. That is outstanding as we sit here today. $12.5 million of that were fines and penalties that were accrued prior to when we brought Cardinal live. In other words, we took the legacy system and we entered all the outstanding tickets and fines into the Cardinal system. So since that time, since September of '05, we have approximately $3 million in new fines that we have outstanding, as well as approximately $4.6 million in penalty fees on top of that. As I continue with this report, there's a couple observations that we've made, a couple things we're going to do a little different. But as I keep going through this, approximately 10%. First of all, about 85% of the tickets we issue are in-state tickets, or people that are registered in Nevada. And we do have a program with the Department of Motor Vehicles, as well as we have some agreements with other states that when people don't pay their tickets, if we have a valid license, we can put a hold on that license registration. Our policy, current policy, which needs to be changed, is that we wait 24 months to place. We wait till we're within 3 months of the expiration of the license plate to send to DMV for collection. DMV will hold that for a total of 24 months. So our current policy is we wait till within 3 months of expiration to send it in because of that 24-month limitation on hold. We also wait. Our current policy is we wait 24 months before we send these items for collection. So, and I can tell you that our collection results are pretty dismal. As you know, as I reported previously, we used Credit Bureau Central, which was selected on a competitive basis. The statistics we see so far is they're only collecting about 3% of those outstanding balances. So we have a couple of observations as a result of this report I'm making to you today, a couple things that we need to do differently. We need to begin to submit tickets that are delinquent. Once they go delinquent, we need to submit them simultaneously to the DMV as well as to collections, irrespective of when the tag date expires. I say that because if, for example, you have a June 30th tag date and you decide to sell your car in January of this year, you're going to get a new tag. You're going to get the same plate with the new expiration ticker, and will, in all likelihood, miss an opportunity by waiting for within the 3-month window of the expiration. The other issue is we're not seeing a great deal of success with DMV. We're seeing some success of the tickets we do send to DMV for collection. We actually pay a $10 fee to do that, which gets tagged on to the driver, assuming they pay. We're collecting about 28% historically on that. So it's not as high as I would have thought it would be. I don't know why that is. I don't know if people roll their cars over, if they know they have a hold. I suppose you could buy a new car and get new plates and let the old ones expire. So I imagine there's ways around it. So that is what it is, and I don't know if we can do anything better with the DMV. The one thing we are looking at is we're very unhappy with Credit Bureau Central's performance. Credit Bureau Central is not a specialist in parking tickets, and I think there are firms out there that specialize in collecting parking tickets, and there's law firms that specialize in this. And so I think what we're going to do is, as a result of this, is look at putting out an RFP for a new collection agent that has a background in collecting up parking tickets, because 3% is pretty dismal. The obvious problem we have at this point is when you have $12.5 million worth of tickets and fines that are 4 years, 3 years or older, chances of collecting them are pretty nil. It's hard to get anybody interested. It's hard to get a collection agent interested in pursuing a $100 ticket with fines that's 4 years old, that we haven't had success in finding them through DMV or through any other state. So that's all I have to share with you in terms of that report, but I think there's a couple of lessons we've learned, and there are a couple of things that we need to do differently to to get a better handle on this. And I think starting the collection process earlier, both on the DMV side as well as a collection agent would be better. And I think we need to look at changing collection agents as well.
Mr. Snelden?
No.
Discussion.
Contractually, where do we stand with our current agency?
We can terminate any time. That's not an issue.
Have they given us any indication why the 3%?
I don't know that we have talked to them directly about it. There are, I can tell you, there's about 2% of the tickets we send to them they have refused to collect, which is not unusual. That's a low percentage, but I don't know if the tickets, if you recall, we weren't using a collection agency in the past. The use of the collection agency is a pretty recent phenomenon, I think driven by the audit report. So what you've done is you've dumped 10 million plus of outstanding tickets onto a collection agency to go collect that are probably stale. So in fairness, that's skewing the number down. But we know that Credit Bureau Central does not have an expertise in this area. There are other firms that actually will interface directly into the Cardinal software, for example, and expedite that collection process and get all the information they need to get right out of our system. So we think we're going to find other people that will perform better than this. I'm not going to tell you it's going to be 50% collection, but we think we can do better, and we think it's worth looking at.
You know, I think that if your data is proper, that they did live there and that is who it is, and it's complete, even if they've moved, you are low. Having been a collector for a lot of years in the banking business, it definitely is low, even if it's old, it appears to me. So I think talking to somebody who knows how to do it, and you see how, as you say, the interface with software, they can do better.
The hold is placed on the license plate itself,
On the registration.
but not on the driver's license. Is there a possibility to tag the two together?
I don't think we legally can do that. There's not a nexus necessarily between the driver of the vehicle and the registered owner necessarily. What oftentimes, for example, we will tag a rental car, and in those cases, through the rental agency, will try to find who the driver of the car was, and obviously they're out of state, which complicates things. But I can't tell you how many cases we have in the hearings officer that, I wasn't driving, it was, my son, my daughter, my estranged spouse. So but it is what it is. It's a lot of money. It's again, most of it, probably well over 60, 65, 70% of it, of the old stuff is probably penalties, not an original ticket, but it's a huge amount of money that we're not collecting, and I think we can do a better job collecting it. Now that we have a system in place that provides better data for us to manage, I think we'll do a better job.
What is the timing for the RFP?
I have to tell you, we've just, being so tied up with the budget preparation and other things, this is a recent discovery on my part, and so we just made that decision recently that we need to go out. So it'll probably take us, it might take us 35, 40 days to get the RFP on the street, and it'll be on the street at least 30. So we're probably anywhere from 60 to 90 days from replacing Credit Bureau Central, I'd say.
I'm sorry.
What percentage of tickets are paid in a timely fashion?
That's a very good question, and I don't have that answer on this report, but it's low. I mean, it's surprisingly low. I would say it's well less than 50%. In any given year, we're only collecting about 60% in total, and most of those are, I'm sure, late. So I think it was well under 50% paid.
Did you say 85% of our?
Or Nevada, right, Nevada plates.
And the 12 million that's prior to 2005, how far back does that go?
Forever.
Forever.
That's part of the other
So that
problem.
ticket I got in 1983, please strike that from the record, that was a joke.
We've always had some discussions with the city attorney on writing off of receivables. The problem with these issues under the GASB rules, we don't record these as revenue when the ticket's issued. We only record as revenue when it's collected. We don't like the fact that we have the ability in Cardinal to archive old tickets, so we can slide them over and archive them. They're never gone. We never lose them. We know they were issued back, 19 whatever. But we have a mechanism for cease any collection effort on something that's so stale and dated. So we do have a write-off policy for regular general receivables, and we probably need to think about a similar type of policy in dealing with these older archive tickets. At what point does it? I mean, this will just continue to grow. This number is going to get larger and larger, and 10 years from now, I'll be telling you it's 40 million, and you'll be rolling your eyes at me. So anyway, what we need to do is concentrate on those that are collectible and do a better job of collecting. Is really what we need to do.
And as part of that evaluation, Mark, and maybe outside the purview of the audit committee today, but if you could also check with Jim Carmody on citywide now, the total collection story from parking tickets up to court cases to outstanding warrants, and maybe we need to take a look at how we go about getting after that money.
Most of the things we try to centralize the collection, but community courts has its own process, and in fact, they have actually had some success stories. They've done some pretty innovative things in terms of their collecting through the bail bonding process and actually sending bailiffs out into areas that previously didn't go. So they actually, off the top of my head, I know that they're doing fairly well, but they're pretty much independent of the treasury function and finance. Treasury function and finance generally concentrates on the other general receivables and departments that may do their own billing process but rely on us to collect it for them. We do that as well. But I certainly can get with Jim and we can look at the big picture of where we stand.
I'd be interested to know, Mr. Workman's indicated 3% is extremely low, but just from a public agency standpoint, what is a reasonable number as far as those outstanding tickets and collection and such?
That's a very good question. We have been approached. I have been approached in years past about unsolicited calls. We get them all the time. Try this, try that. We're specialists in this area. And there are at least two firms that I recall that approached us specifically in collecting parking tickets. One was a law firm that specialized in it. So may make a difference.
What sometimes happens, and I'm not sure of the jurisdictions, is they can have a program where they can identify all this and go to the city council or its governing authority and say, not the stuff in the last 90 days or whatever, but we're talking the old, maybe even a year old. And they go to them and say, we're going to get some press on this, and they say, we're going to have a program. If you have those with penalties, it's almost an amnesty program. We're going to write off some of that if you'll pay it within 90 days. And you make every attempt to find them. And then, if possible, you put those names in the paper. And you do certain things to where it's a big effort. And after that effort, you get to the collection agency, anything over $100 or $200. The little bitty ones. By the way, no collection agency, regardless of what they tell you, is going to spend a lot of time on some $100. They're just not going to do it. The call will not be made. But the other thing is, if you can have that information on the people in a cross-check database with other things, not just registration, but maybe current utilities, whatever you're legally allowed to do, the amazing things start to happen when people know they've been found out.
Right.
And especially if they know they got a 90-day period and the legal people have said okay. And then you still can use one of these agencies. A friend of mine owns one, and it's an agency, and he's got the legal people there, attorneys in it. Law firms normally don't give you back as much, per se. But a collection agency with attorneys in it, with a program, what you do, you immediately turn it to them, and then the next thing you know, you just don't ever have $10 million added up. It just doesn't ever happen. That way, again, you wait your time when you should get your receipts. right after the date when you're receiving a good part of it, turn it to them then when they're relatively fresh, and you're going to get most of it. Or you're going to get 40-something% probably.
Further discussion? Is there a motion?
I would move to proceed with the report.
Is there a second?
Second.
David?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Benson.
Thank you.
Item 14, report and possible action on sales tax for non-city sales. Mr. Snelden first.
Mr. Chairman, at our last audit committee meeting, while we were reviewing open audit recommendations, we noted this item, and the committee asked for a report regarding potential city liability on the sales tax. Philip Marmorowski of the City Auditor's Office will report on this issue.
Good morning, Phil Marmorowski. Based on the work performed, a good case can be made that the City of Las Vegas does not have to collect and remit sales taxes to the state of Nevada. The city is exempt from paying sales taxes on purchases. The city is not a retail business or person as NRS defined. The city, by definition, is a non-profit organization whose function is to promote the public good. The city does not have to collect sales tax on non-exempt items sold or for items sold that are normally exempt from sales tax in the normal retail trade. The city would not have to collect sales tax on non-exempt items if it was a selling agent for a filed and approved not-for-profit organization. The city would have to collect sales taxes if it acted as a selling agent for a for-profit business or organization and not selling an exempt item.
Question. Yeah, and maybe I can draw this in a different vein here. Hypothetically, when a contractor performs a service for the city, planning typically for most tax professionals is to attempt to have the materials acquired directly by the nonprofit organization, in this case by the city, to at least under, as I understand the sales and use tax rules, at least to at that point identify who the end user is and therefore exempt that purchase from sales tax. The issue arises when the contractor, as an example, is short materials, runs down to a supply house, pays the sales or use tax, and then attempts to pass that on to the city. And I think that's part of the concern that we had previously, is that being controlled so that the city is not unnecessarily incurring the sales or use tax, but rather that contractor is working through the mechanism that's in place so that the city is not incurring. You're looking at me, Mr. Snelden. I would suggest to you, from experience with contractors and other vendors, that when they do come up short, my hypothetical is what takes place, and then the burden is passed on. The effort to attempt to pass that burden on to the city is made. And I think that was what we were anticipating as part of the report, is identifying the vendors, not per name per se in general terms, the awareness, and to help, if you will, mitigate the cost to the city. And I think that comes back once again to the finance director and comes back to possibly those that are involved with contracts. The report is well stated and is very accurate as presented here. But the issue is, as I just described it. And that's a concern for us as an oversight committee, for the city auditors to be addressing the issue of evaluating within an audit on the larger contracts. I wouldn't anticipate on minuscule or de minimis contracts that you would be taking that energy as much as you would on the larger contracts, because once again we're looking for the exemption that is applicable to a nonprofit organization, in this case the City of Las Vegas, and its requirements being met so that that sales tax or use tax is not incurred.
Mark, when we go out and build a park or a community center, we spend $20, $30 million. We end up being the owner of all the facility and playground equipment and fields and lights. Do we pay?
We would be exempt from sales tax, so we would make sure that that's not in any of the pricing. But the situation that Mr. Kearns described may occur. Now, we scrutinize those invoices, those requests for payments as much as the detail provides, but I would submit that I would not surprise me that we don't get some sales tax creep in from time to time. But the answer to your question is no, we don't.
So the lights, even if it's the general contractor purchasing all the equipment, they don't charge us back any sales tax.
For example,
is it factored into their price, or is that part of the bid that they will
we
not
look to
pay?
make sure it's to the extent, if we see it, to the extent we see it, it would be removed.
So it's part of your contract then to exclude that, specifically cannot be billed as a part of cost breakdown on a contract. So if they do so, they're breaching the contract.
No, it's just a matter of catching them doing it.
Mr. Snow.
As you can tell, this is the second item, or actually the third item we've talked about today that relates to sales tax, and it can get kind of complicated. In the particular case that started this, we were talking about a situation at Dula Gym where the city was selling water for an outside organization. And as you can see from what Philip Marmorowski had said, there is a possibility that the city could end up being liable for collecting and remitting sales tax. So on that aspect, in addition to what you've discussed, Mr. Kern and Councilman Brown have discussed, whether also there needs to be an abundance of caution dealing with any situations where we're acting as some type of a selling agent for an organization to make sure that we're protected and not and we just have to be careful to make sure that if we have to know whether it's going to be an exempt, non-exempt, whether they're not-for-profit, and it's not just a not-for-profit. That doesn't automatically mean that they're not subject to sales tax, because if they're not recognized by the state as a not-for-profit, then they still may be required to pay sales tax. So, and I know we have operations related, and particularly to leisure services, where this could come up again, but they're complicated issues.
It is complicated, Mark, before you comment. The other issue and the other concern that I believe we have for the city auditors, because you're out there testing, if you will, the waters, is the subcontractors as well. And the fact that the contractors don't always manage the subs, and the subs are out there incurring these costs. They pass it on as an invoice without disclosure of sales taxes. The other issue that we're also concerned with, that you've identified, is the resale of in this case, of refreshments, so to speak. Another state, one of our sister states, has taken it upon themselves to have a full-blown program where they are now, and I suspect it's just a matter of time before Nevada buys into this, where they're now beginning to review what's happening with cities. And it's been pretty well written. I bring this up only because it's an awareness point. It's an area that's hot and heavy. I'm aware of subcontractors in this community that, they underbid. And as a result, they're desperate. They run out, they pay for these materials. It's not cheap. And the cost is being passed on to the municipalities. And those are very difficult to catch, because when a sub passes a cost on to the general, it's a bill. It's not the detail, I think, that we anticipated it to be. So we have some other issues that maybe exist as well. And these are just awareness issues for audit purposes this time. And the reselling is a big issue. That is really big issues. Mr. Benson, your comment, please.
I was just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to comment that the more and more that we get into partnering with others, be they nonprofit or for-profit, this issue comes up. And when we talk about the situation of selling water at Doolittle, for example, is one issue. I can remember a situation here with the tennis event where I believe we were asked to help provide resources to sell merchandise for a for-profit entity, and that until we figured out what was going on, we were okay. The request was to provide labor to help do that. It wasn't to avail themselves of any tax exemption, and I believe in that case taxes were collected. And these sorts of things get more and more complicated the more creative we get out of necessity for delivering services. And so it is something that will only become more important as time goes on, I believe.
Further discussion on this?
I move to receive this report.
Is there a second?
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 15, report and possible action on status of delivery of documented procedures of audit trails to the city auditor's office. Mr. Snowden, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our last audit committee meeting, one of the other issues that we were discussing with the open audit recommendations, this particular issue came up, and you asked Mr. Carmody, the court's administrator, to deliver documented procedure of audit trails to the city auditor's office. I'd like to report to you that Mr. Carmody did in fact deliver those procedures of audit trails as required by the committee within that specified period of time. And that concludes my report.
Is there any further discussion on this matter? Is there a motion?
I make the motion.
Is there a second?
Yes. Second.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Item 16, discussion of possible action on review of building and safety department express inspections. Mr. Snowden, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nancy Beatty was the lead auditor on this project, and she will report on the results of this review.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, the Building and Safety Department requested the assistance of the City Auditor's Office in reviewing the express inspection process. Building and Safety is responsible for ensuring that construction within the City of Las Vegas conforms to established building codes. One aspect of this oversight is the inspection of construction activity that is performed by the Inspection Division. Express inspections were established to allow for flexibility in scheduling set-time inspections for an additional fee. The objective of our review was to identify and evaluate the adequacy of the existing controls relating to the express inspection process. We identified the following control issues during our review. The acceptance of checks was not in compliance with city check acceptance procedures. Receipted checks were not adequately safeguarded. Inconsistent procedures were used to receipt express inspection checks. Scheduled inspections were not reconciled to the deposited checks. We were unable to reconcile the July monthly cash summary sheet to July actual activity for express inspections. Inspectors accepted checks for amounts that exceeded the required fees. The full amount of the check was recorded as express inspections. Overpayments not returned to customers within 3 years are considered to be unclaimed property subject to NRS requirements. Documents were not maintained in accordance with the state of Nevada and department retention policies. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
You just took a big breath. Mr. Snowden, were you ready to make a statement?
Well, yes, I would. I'd like to say that on this particular one, this particular audit, this review of the express inspections, well, then the Building and Safety Department was extremely cooperative with this, and virtually all of the recommendations have been implemented. I think there is one that remains open, that is only open because we're waiting on some systems development related to that. But they were very cooperative, and in fact, they had virtually everything implemented before we even issued the report. So I think it was a good experience, and I think that Building and Safety was very responsive to what we found.
Is there other discussion on this?
The question I would have is, how large is that overpayment? Is it often, and is it significant?
What happens is the contractors will keep like $100 checks in their cap. And if the inspection were like 150, and they'd have 2 checks, and that was a consistent policy of what building and safety wasn't aware that's unclaimed property.
Sure.
And they discontinued the practice.
Building and safety have a representative here? Oh, Mr. Wood, hiding in the background. It's funny how this lights out in there, Paul. You control the electrical in this room?
Not me.
Just wanted to get your reaction. Everything okay?
Yes, sir. For the record, my name is Paul Wilkins, Director of the Building Department. And we started this, we asked for this audit because we became the first accredited building department in the United States. And part of the accreditation process, when we had our auditors come in and review us for this accreditation, ask us about this. So we saw some inconsistencies and asked the auditors department if they'd come in and help us out on this. So we've tried to do everything possible to comply with the regulations for the state and city of Las Vegas, and also to make sure that we're a customer service oriented building department.
Mr. Chairman, I kind of set Mr. Wilkins up for that because in a briefing with RAD, it was another example how a department proactively went to the audit function for all the right reasons. The audit function performed their responsibilities, and in return the department responded accordingly. So it's a perfect world. I just wanted to note that because, again, it's an example that it's working. The audit function is working, and when the departments take that proactive approach, good things happen.
Thank you.
It just so happens that the unclaimed property is one of the main ways it looks like the legislature is going to fund our roads in the future. So keep collecting that, if you would. I would move for an approval of this. Discussions, if you're ready for that.
I'm ready for a motion. It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilkins. Nancy, abstention. Agenda item 17, discussion and possible action on internal control review activity report, December 31, 2006. Mr. Snow.
And Mr. Chairman, Gary Phillips was the lead auditor in the Internal Control Review Activity Report, and he's unavailable today, so I'll present that report. The Internal Control Review Report includes 2 internal control reviews for the 6 months ending December the 31st, 2006. Included are 3 recommendations, 1 for neighborhood services and 2 for leisure services. The 1 recommendation in neighborhood services is related to the Evolve gift card issue, and I should mention that the neighborhood services quickly and aggressively addressed our recommendation, going well beyond the requirements of our recommendation. The 2 recommendations related to the leisure services were for the missing deposit at Becker Community School. Management agreed on all 3 recommendations, and these recommendations will be tracked in the follow-up. And that concludes my report.
Is there any discussion on this?
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second with a comment similar to Mr. Wilkins to both departments. Thank you for responding quickly and aggressively.
All in favor?
Aye.
And further discussion item, I have to tell you, I appreciate Dr. Jackson and the fact that she has done so well to implement these changes over these years and the difficulty she experiences just coming with leisure services. I think she's done an excellent job, and I really appreciate it.
Try to slow.
Play ball. Though I do have a comment, there is a basketball hoop that's been down for months in my area. But I figure it's the cost associated with agenda item 18, discussion and possible action on audit of city procurement card program. Mr. Smith, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Smith was the lead auditor and will present the results of our audit.
Thank you. Good morning, committee members. The city has a procurement card program in which city employees are issued credit cards for use in purchasing small dollar business-related goods and services. During fiscal year 06, the city had approximately 338 outstanding P cards and had approximately 25,000 purchases with P cards totaling over $5 million. The P-Card program is administered by the Purchasing and Accounting Divisions of Finance. The scope of our audit included fiscal year 2006 transactions. Subsequent to the end of the audit, the city implemented a new P-Card software program, and while the software has changed, the audit recommendations remain applicable as they address internal controls surrounding the software. The following recommendations are made to the Department of Finance. There is a need for documented desk procedures for purchasing and accounting staff in which responsibilities are clearly defined for each of these divisions. There's a need for additional routine data analysis of P-Card transactions to identify irregular or unusual transactions. Transactions were identified that are considered prohibited transactions under city policy, and improved controls are needed over the monitoring of prohibited P-Card transactions. Finance has a strike program in which P-Card holders may have their P-Card taken away after 3 policy violations or 3 documentation deficiencies are identified. Deficiencies in this program were identified and need to be addressed. Approvers of P-Card holder transactions at the department level are the first and key line of defense against fraudulent, improper, and abusive P-Card purchases, as these individuals are the closest to the business activities of the cardholders. We identified the need for a required training program for approvers and guidance for identifying common red flags of fraudulent, improper, and abusive transactions. Purchasing is responsible for evaluating P-Card transactions for contracting opportunities. We found the need for more formalization to this process. We identified cardholders with limited card use during the year and have recommended the creation of a documented approach to evaluate cardholder activity and spending limits. We also identified the need for management reports summarizing P-Card activity. Finance was very helpful with this audit and have been very receptive to our recommendations, and they've already begun addressing many of them. Finance, as I already mentioned, implemented the new P-Card software program in January, and they've already conducted training of all the P-Card holders and approvers during January and February. Our office participated in these trainings and warned employees of the serious consequences for misuse of their P-Cards and attempted to help the approvers better understand the importance of their roles in approving the P-Card transactions. Finance has responded to the report and expects that all the audit recommendations will be addressed by December 2007. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have about this report.
Do we have any discussions on this?
Mark, thank you, Mark. The purchasing is responsible for a lot of this oversight. The first question would be, did we just hire some more resources down there, some people?
There are no new positions. Read my lips now. No, we have not. We've done some reorganizations, and may help to give you a little background to how we got here, and the reason why the accounting and purchasing so tied at the hip on this. 10 years ago, we had field purchase orders that were on books that were on top of everybody's truck, and anyone could buy anything, and it was quite a problem, and there were issues and some frauds that were perpetrated. So we moved to a credit card-based program because it was certainly transferable. You can put it in your wallet, take it where you need it, and it also established some accountability. We know who's got what card, and we can hold them accountable for their actions. The accounting side of it was that we were also looking for a system that would interface directly into the financial system, so that in the old days, you make with the field purchase orders that we didn't know they bought until the invoice showed up. In this case, similar fashion, it may be anywhere from 50 to 30 days before we get a bill from the credit card company that says your people bought these things. We wanted to have real-time information, and we wanted to put it in the hands of the departments that were responsible for the employees that were making the purchases, so they could get immediate feedback of these people are buying these items on these days. And so that's how we got into this process. The purchasing card really is just a special form of purchasing authority that purchasing grants to the departments for small items that, frankly, the create a purchase order for $100 items, it's not worth it. So that's how we got into this process. It was, the program is, from the eyes of the departments, is very successful because it gives them what they need. It also is prone to abuses, and so we've been watching the number of cards, who's got the cards, how often are they reconciling their account as they are directed. If they don't reconcile it, we keep statistics on performance of people that don't, and there are ways that we can sweep those cards in and get them taken care of without the reconciliation, and then go back after the fact and deal with the department that's not being responsive. So we have those processes in place, but there are still much more that we could be doing, and the new system, which thanks to city auditors for their participation, that really was very helpful. It was well received. The training was very good. Approvers are now starting to recognize what their role is and where they fit into this, and things are much improved, but it's still pretty much a journey.
When the P card, is that just a credit card like City of Las Vegas?
It's a credit card that has City of Las Vegas on it. It also has our tax exemption notice on it as well, so there's no confusion about who's buying what and whether it's a tax exempt purchase or not.
Well, and I appreciate, because 25,000 purchases, $5 million.
It's about $200 a pop on average.
That's serious. Do we any Discover rebate like 1% or anything?
No. We do. Go ahead, Mary.
We do get a rebate about $6,000–7,000 a year for our purchases through our credit card company.
Off $5 million?
Currently, our new company, that was actually our Bank of America. That's about what it was. Our new company, there's new provisions in that. I'm not familiar with exactly. Kathy Rainey would know that number on that, but it did change with our new contract.
Well, we're looking for a couple $100,000 for the right-hand turn battle, so.
Well, Paul, is there, do you have any input on that?
Yes, it's a competitive situation. It's ever-changing. And our bank has gone out to companies to do the same thing, provide a service. And it's different than it was 2 years ago. So it would, whatever your contract time is, it's always a good thing to look at. For on that amount of money, I don't know whether you get 200,000, you could probably get 50 to 80,000, depending on the services they give you. I assume that when you say if somebody doesn't regulate it properly, that you could pull it, you hot card that, so they go to make purchase, it just doesn't work, you have that capacity.
We have that ability to do that.
Yeah. So yeah, depending on the services given, as you compare the different services, there's some very aggressive programs now.
I would tell you that from our perspective, while getting the discount, sharing the discounts, helpful and beneficial, we're always much more concerned about having systems that go along with the process that give us the best absolute control. So we're willing to give up a little bit on the fee sharing in order to make sure we have a system and a process that's going to make sure that we don't keep coming in front of this committee with the credit card problem.
What's happening now is the companies that provide these have different people that provide them service on software, et cetera. And that's what's changing so much. The companies themselves are very similar, but some of them subscribe to things that would give you some ability to monitor far even beyond what you've ever done. It's very, very cutting edge right now.
And some of that depends also on what the vendor, the level of reporting the vendor has in the system as well, which also is changing and evolving and getting much more detailed. So.
Right.
Well, the last comment would be back to Mr. Snelding's report on the savings. And this is an example where I'm not sure if we can do hard costs, but 25,000 purchases with P cards versus just a few years ago the paper. And that just in human resource alone has got to be very, very significant.
Just under the old field purchase order process, I can't imagine the late fees and penalties we paid the vendors because we never knew we bought anything until the invoice showed up and couldn't match it to anything. So this is all automated for us as much as is humanly possible.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 19, discussion of possible action on city cell phone charges. Mr. Snelling.
Mr. Chairman, Philip Momorowski was the lead auditor on this audit and will present the results of our audit.
Yes, Phil Momorowski. Cell phones cost the city approximately $625,000 annually for both data and voice communications. Audit performed data mining on all 2 million phone records, which covered over 4.7 million minutes used over 2 fiscal years. Audit software was used to accomplish this. Normally, only a small audit sample would be reviewed in detail. The data mining is a new approach the audit is taking to look at all the records, especially with the new capabilities. Audit found need for greater accountability, assignment of phones to individuals, need for more proactive management over usage, enhancement of monitoring controls. Management has agreed to start to provide better monitoring controls. Inventory, assignment, and accountability. Inventory records have become less accurate over time. This can be accounted for by the growth of the number of cell phones, the failure of communications to inform individuals of changes, and numerous sources of inventory information. There are 456 cell phones, or 39%, not assigned to an individual for accountability purposes. There is no call accountability over usage on these phones. Controls require reliability and updated inventory records. Management has responded that each department will review and validate use, assignment, and need. This is the first step in better ongoing monitoring program. Business and personal call accountability. City policy states reasonable personal calls must be reimbursed at the rate of 6 cents per minute. About 11% of all calls are classified as personal calls. These calls use 13% of the total usage. The 6% covers about 4% of the cost of cell phones. An ongoing monitoring program is needed to determine that the city assets are used in the most productive manner. Audit found 8,338 different called numbers being classified as both business and personal by the same person from the same phone number. There was no other attempt to validate business and personal calls with regards to items. Better control requires establishment of an ongoing control review program. Management has responded that reminders about city policy and suggested alternative practices will be distributed. Plan standard rates will be reviewed for possible adjustments. City cell phones. There are 1,114 cell phone numbers in the city. 19% of the cell phone plans cost over $100 per month. 75% of the cell phone plans cost between $25 and $99.99 per month. Each user is allowed to have any plan their manager will approve. With all the plans with different features, usage, limits, and expenses, it adds to the control monitoring issues. Better controls require reduction in plan choices. Management will consolidate into 5 plan choices with pooled minutes. Quarterly reviews will take place for proper plan distribution. Cell phone usage. There is underutilization of cell phones. Audit found 347 cell phones with no usage during a 1-month test period. There is overutilization of cell phones. Audit found that the top 200 cell phone numbers used between 2.8 and 21.4 work weeks for calls. This included internet data communication calls. Vendors added other fees which amount to $36,000 per year.
Philip, Mr. Chairman, please. Philip, excuse me. Go back to that last bullet.
The work weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know it makes sense to you, but walk me through that one. The top 200 cell phone numbers used between 2.8 and 21.4
work weeks. I didn't want to say man weeks. In other words, over the test period of 2 fiscal years, the top 200 cell phone numbers made calls amounting to the equivalent of 2.8 to 21.4 work weeks. That's a 40-hour week.
Over 2 years or over a 1 year period?
Over 2 years.
Over a 2-year period.
And that included internet calls. So, I mean, because there was no way to differentiate an internet number because it's just a cell phone number, and the city pays for it.
So this, the top cell phone user, the award winner, spent 21.4
work
times
weeks,
40
that number.
hours over a 2-year period.
That number was, yes, that phone number, that cell phone number.
Okay, thank you.
Better Controls requires a stepped-up management ongoing review program. Management will monitor the distribution of phones and the pooled plans for cost effectiveness and perform a validation review for use, assignment, and need. Management has responded in a positive manner to the audit recommendations. I will be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
So let me ask two questions here, and I have a second one by Councilman Brown brought up as well. Maybe I can start at this point. Explain to me what an internet data communication call is.
BlackBerry, a
Text
wireless
messaging.
card that you can put into your laptop.
And is there an additional charge for text messaging or BlackBerry type messaging?
I believe that Mike Hogan's will answer that question.
Mike Hogan, IT department manager.
It's good to have you here, Mike.
Oh, thank
We
you.
don't get to see you at the audit committee.
Not very often. Usually Joe's here, and he apologizes for not being able to be here, so he asked me to fill in for him. The plans that we have for both data for BlackBerries and for the air cards have unlimited usage plans. We do pay one flat fee per month for that. So there is no additional cost for any other data type transmission.
And that's not controlled by to whom the cell phone is assigned to?
Yes, it is. The person that has the number, either the air card or the BlackBerry, is assigned to a specific person. In most cases, as Philip indicated, not all are.
Do you differentiate between management and the rank and file, if I could use that term, as to who has the ability to use text messaging? And who is it that really has the need?
For the data use, you mean?
Yeah.
That is basically approved through the individual departments, through management of the departments. They determine who gets that type of service. If they want to have a BlackBerry device per se, that's not, an individual can't request that and just get that without approval of management.
So it is a
Right.
controlled
Yes.
mechanism
Right.
that is in place.
Right.
What about games?
We don't install any games on the devices. We don't allow them to be. That's one thing that's very hard for us to monitor and to determine whether there would actually be games on BlackBerry type devices. I'm not sure if there's a way for us to monitor.
And Philip, I think you mentioned that there may be some employees who have slid cards in to permit them to expand the nature of the use of the
Yes.
BlackBerry phone.
Yes.
Which, Mike, you're indicating is not something that can be readily identified.
By sliding cards into, I'm not familiar with that.
Air cards.
The air cards
Air
are,
cards.
air card is merely, it's a card that goes into a laptop computer that allows somebody to connect to our network or to the internet from a remote location. It provides the connectivity back in. All of the connectivity comes back in through the independent carriers, the individual carriers. It would allow them to access internet. Internet is controlled through our permissions and our firewalls internally. When somebody logs into that card, they come back in through the city to go back out. So all of our controls to the internet are maintained from that process when they use that attachment.
The air card is a set fee on a monthly basis. So once you put it into your laptop, you can use it for, unlimited amount of time to access anything the internet will allow you to access.
Typically, those are assigned to either people that are working in the field or to people that travel out of town a lot and need to be able to communicate back to the city and do their job.
I would like to comment on as Councilman Brown indicated, the winner of 21.4 work weeks. That was one person.
That was one cell phone number.
One cell phone number.
Because it could have been an internet connection, because again, the card number looks like a regular phone number with area code, so there was not the possibility to differentiate which ones were internet without detail. I just summarized the amount of usage by cell phone number.
So that one cell phone number had 21.4
Correct.
equivalent work weeks.
Correct, Mr.
But
Chairman.
you don't know who that person is.
I did not look into who that person, or if it was an air card number.
Would we be interested in that in case it was not, how do I state this kindly, it's not the person who should be incurring those type of hours?
I can answer that question,
Yeah.
and that it was part of our response. Part of what we're going to be doing is implementing a program where we have certain thresholds, and when employees or phones, for lack of a better term, exceed those thresholds, those reports are going to go to the individual departments that oversee those people to validate whether that usage is appropriate or not. So we're instituting that plan.
I can suggest to you, I'm not shocked that certain people within the city would have a need to use multiple work weeks of hours over a 2-year period of time. I can see the importance to that, but at the right level. This is what I'm suggesting from the city auditor's perspective, Brad. I'm not chastising here, but I would have thought you would have taken that next step to identify. And particularly if it's based off a particular cell phone number, that would have been easy. Who has that assigned to that? Because one of the abuses that theoretically can take place is me sharing my cell phone with Mr. Workman and others using it, and then how do you control that environment?
Mr. Chairman, we approached this and the next audit that we're going to talk about in kind of a 2 or 3 step approach to it. The first step was to look at the controls and to look at what was available and what type of detection and prevention controls, the controls themselves were out there. The second step, and I think city management and IT has stepped up to the plate on that in identifying those things that meet those thresholds. The third step is what we intend to do is we will also monitor that, and we're going to be looking for the award winner, and then we're going to go validate that ourselves. We just didn't take it to that step at this point.
Okay, and then the work week workers that have weekend usage, did you take it to that step?
Yes, but we will build. If I'm understanding your question, is we're going to look at those same kind of thresholds that would be indicative of an employee abusing or misusing this particular asset, and then we are going to go. The person is much like the P card situation. The person who has the most knowledge about what that employee is doing is the one who really should be controlling and would be in a position to know if that particular behavior is acceptable or in line with what that person's or what that employee's task is. And so what we will do is we will monitor and look for the red flags that will let us know this is one we need to look at and at least take it to that level of management to see if it's appropriate. So like I said, we really approach this with a 2 or 3 step process. The first step was just to make a general survey and find out what controls were available and try to bring those controls up to something that we could that would be acceptable that we could use.
Further discussion, please.
Phillips, the data mining, I think I know what that means. But you're saying that for 2 years with audit software, you were able to analyze every cell call that was made.
Yes, that is correct.
That's scary. That's scary. And yet, Mike, I'm real surprised with the number, 625,000 annually. I thought it would be much higher. Now, that number is just for usage,
That's total cost for cell phones for the,
okay, for the
Annual.
service of having that phone and any kind of phone calls.
as well as purchasing the hardware. All costs.
It's amazing.
And we're actually going to be able to save some money on that through some consolidation of plans we're working on with vendors. So we're going to be able to get that down a little bit more.
Now, when we purchase, we have an inventory, 1,114 cell phones. Are we locked into that hardware with whatever vendor we have?
We have two vendors currently that we use for cellular or for wireless communications. Actually, we have three now. We just added a third one because of the specific requirement. But we have three vendors, two primary for cellular phones and BlackBerry devices. One being Verizon, and one was Nextel, who purchased Sprint, so it's now Sprint and Nextel. Two unique needs. The Sprint Nextel were, when we first entered into the contract with them, had the push-to-talk capability or the radio type capability. So we use that to augment some of our radio users. People that needed radios and cell phones, now they could do that with one device instead of two. So we use those vendors from that. We have some standardized hardware within the specific vendors. There was an act, I believe about a year and a half, I can't remember exactly ago, Number Portability Act. That prior to that time, if you had a phone number and you wanted to switch to a different vendor, you had to switch phone numbers. Now you can take your phone number and go between vendors if necessary, and we do a fair amount of that, and there's not a penalty we pay for that. It's just merely managing the length of time that we have the agreement with the vendor. Generally speaking, when we get a new device, they like us to have the device for a year or two. But given the volume of phones that we have and everything, we have never had any issue or concern come up with that.
75% of the cell phone plans cost between $25 and $99 per month. Now, that user had that plan. Is that unlimited minutes, or is it like one of those 2,000 minutes per month plan, or how does that work?
Do you want to go ahead?
Yes, at the time of the audit, before the consolidation by management in the plan, it was rapid growth of the cell phone numbers, that again, you could just go to your manager and say, I wanted a certain thing. Now with the control of the 5 plans that management has implemented and the pooling of minutes, because some of the plans we found during the audit period they were paying for overages, even though we had number of phones not being used. Again, this has been pointed out, and now it has been corrected so that there will be a pool minute. So if we have a phone that is not being used and someone uses overage, the city won't be assessed any additional fees.
So that number will become even more efficient with the communications aspect.
Yes.
How do you account for the one factor on the cell phones? One part of the audit found 347 cell phones with no usage during a 1-month test period.
What that was I picked for each vendor just 1 month to see if there was any minutes being used on those phones. The data showed that at that time, some of them are spare phones. There's a certain number, like the fire needs a certain spare phone. If something happens to one, they need a cell phone now. They're not going to wait for another one. And there are other phones that are not being used that are necessary, but there's just no usage for a particular minute.
And just to indicate a little more on that, on the push-to-talk feature, there are some of those devices that are only enabled for radio only, so they would not show any cell phone minutes, and we pay a lower rate for those.
Philip, would it be difficult to do a couple more test period months? Would that be too much additional work? I'd be interested in what that 347 number looks like with a couple of sample months.
No problem. We can do that.
One of the things that I think will be of some value is when we get our plan implemented, I believe in October is our time frame, or our deadline for that. Right. Hopefully we'll get it done sooner. We're going to have a lot better reporting and management of exactly what you're asking for. So yeah, I think we can get something for you.
Mike, I'm disappointed. I was hoping, like the P cards, we could find some way to get more money out of this.
Well, we're going to get a little bit, but we'll probably get maybe, based on the discussions with my vendors, I think I'm going to end up with about maybe $50,000 a year in savings, honestly. So it's not a lot. It's not quite your 200-300 you were looking for, but it's a step in the way.
But it's amazing what technology, and unfortunately I'm a dinosaur, but it's amazing what technology has done. And this may be, this was a very enlightening report for me, and certainly, Mike, you do a great job at communications. I'll direct this comment, Orlando, to you in the manager's office. Is a few years ago, and it may have been a little bit longer, Dr. Selby or Ms. Valentine sent a memo out kind of taking a look at who has cell phones and having a reevaluation, whether people just had them because it was the latest thing to do. And in part, as far as the efficiency there, perhaps you could talk to Dr. Selby and maybe do one of those kind of annual or every couple of years throw it. Who has a cell phone? Is it mandatory? How many subscriptions to the Review Journal do we have? So that's a separate article. But thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. That was very enlightening.
One question with respect to Councilman Brown's request. Maybe I can direct this at you, Mike. Is it possible for Philip to determine which of those are radios on the 347, or is that something you can assist him with?
Yeah, we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to identify those. Again, we're looking at some enhanced reporting features that were kind of drawn out that we probably need to have a little bit better oversight, and our new reports are going to provide some of that information, so we'll be able to certainly indicate those numbers.
And can you also include the count for fire department as to the extras that they have, or just the awareness so that it doesn't appear as just 347 excess phones out there, but it's also to, if you will, to aid and abet fire and emergency people.
Certainly, and I know what you asked Orlando to do. We're going to be undertaking that as one of our very first steps, is sending out a list of all of the phones to all of the departments with their usage indicated on it and type of phone and service, and have them validate the need for that. We're going to do that initially when we set this up, and then that will be an ongoing thing that we are going to be doing, probably as part of the budget process.
Thank you. Any other discussion for you? Mr. Snell?
Mr. Chairman, just to give us some clarification on that request, would you like, are you asking us to go back in and look at the data that Philip used to check a couple of extra months related to that, or would you like us to wait until Mr. Hogan has implemented the changes he's got and have them come back and give you a report?
Well, let me defer that to Councilman Brown as he made the request.
Well, I understand better now the fire scenario or just a backup scenario, but the 347 cell phones during that test period compared to the total of 1,100, that seemed a little bit high. So it maybe just work. I don't think it has to come back as a formal report, but if you could just work with Mike and the system and maybe report back at the next meeting or a couple meetings, just in your general manager or your general report. I don't think we have to direct them to do anything more significant than that.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
I said a motion.
Is there a
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and approved. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Item agenda 20, discussion of possible action on audit of citywide long-distance telephone calls. Mr. Snowden?
Mr. Chairman, Philip Mumorowski also was the lead auditor on this, and he will present the results of our audit.
The long-distance usage was over the same 2 fiscal years that the cell phone was conducted, and then they were also reviewed. Long-distance cost the city approximately $14,500 per year because the city is giving a 90% discount by the vendor. The long distance over the audit period used 5.8 people years for over 210,000 calls. Audit found the need for greater accountability. No active and ongoing monitoring program, third-party billings by vendors, 87,000 calls were placed without the use of access calls, 2,000 long-distance calls were made which lasted over 15 minutes. the longest call being 346 minutes. 37 access codes had over 500 calls, the highest having 1,563 calls made from the access code. This one access code used 4,070 minutes. Better controls require management to set up more active and ongoing monitoring program. Management has agreed to provide departments with reports that provide detailed usage of calls over established usage thresholds. These thresholds will be established by management. I will be happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Is there any discussion on this item? I do have a question. Maybe it's just the system that I subscribe to, but my long distance calls are free. And in the report here, it says that we're recommending cellular phones not be used for long distance calls. Is there a charge on the cells for long distance calls?
No, there's not.
Okay. Because the recommendation here appears to be one of the criteria is that it's saying use of cellular phones to place long distance calls should be restricted to times when the landline is not available. Would we want to encourage the use of a cell phone for long distance calls for business purposes? I'm not suggesting that as a recommendation, but I'm just pointing out that it's cut my costs by using my cell phone.
Mr. Chairman, at the time of the audit, we were running into certain cell phone numbers that were having overage charges. This was before management agreed to implement the 5 plans with pooled minutes. So at the time of the review, it cost the city extra money to use a cell phone if we were running into overage charges.
I see. Okay. For clarification purposes, right?
For clarification purposes.
That is clarified. Because again, we're looking at a balancing act here for costs for the city, and I wouldn't want this report to discourage versus encourage the proper usage as defined by the departments. The other is it says that international calls are not monitored and not approved, if I read this correctly.
Mr. Chairman, the international, believe it or not, for the city is very, very limited. There is not a high percentage of international calls being made.
Great. That was going to be my question.
You're right. No,
that-
there isn't. They're not monitored, but there is not a high instance of international calls.
They're treated just like regular long-distance calls. The individuals need to validate whether it was a valid business call or not, but there's currently no management oversight to review that, and that's one of the threshold items that we're going to place
Well,
on.
I
for
would
management.
assume it's Mr. Vincent making these calls.
Can't go all the time.
If by chance, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vincent's name comes up on the cell phone with the 21 work weeks and the longest call, 346 minutes, then we'll have an issue. If those two are combined.
I tell you what, Councilman, I take a bet on which floor that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. Mr. Chairman, please. Again, I'm just amazed at $14,000 and 90% discount from our vendor. Who is our vendor, by the way?
Sprint.
Sprint, okay.
Or Embark.
No, it is actually Sprint.
Oh, it's
The long
actually Sprint?
distance
Oh.
did not move with Embark.
Oh.
The long distance is with Sprint still.
Now, what is it? What is the hardware for our telephone system run us on an annual basis? Is that mostly? I'm sure we replace phones and such.
We have about 60% of the phones that we use. We have our own phone switches, which we have our own switched environment. The other 40% we lease phone lines from Embark for those outlying facilities it's not financially feasible to put a switch in. So the actual total cost for all, wow, I know that we pay. I'd have to go back to finance to find out for sure what the cost for Embark for the leased phones is, and the leased phone lines. I know that we pay an annual maintenance on our switches of about $72,000 a year to just a maintenance contract on our switches.
Can't find any money in the communication, of course. Mike, basically this technology and stuff, this computer and cell phone, it's here to stay, is that what you're telling me?
Pretty much, pretty much. It's also transitioning. We're also going to be looking in towards the future to what you've heard of is IP telephony or VoIP, where we can use the same data line for also voice communication. We just have to make sure that our network is robust and supportable enough to be able to support that. That will allow us to possibly save a little more on communications instead of having to have both a voice circuit and a data circuit to one facility. We can probably minimize to one data circuit. It's something we're going to be looking at in the next 2-3 years.
I would move to accept the report.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hogan. Thank you, Philip. Item 21, citizen participation. Before we get there, I'll make a couple of general comments, whether warranted or not. I do appreciate the opportunity to be permitted at the pleasure of the City Council to serve here. More importantly, I really appreciate the people that I have an opportunity to work with, which is the city auditors as well as other members of the city itself, and the great amount of respect that I have developed over the years for them, not that I lack respect. Also for the controls that have been implemented by each of the department heads, and with respect to Dr. Jackson as a reaffirmation, she had a very, very difficult role to play early on. The city auditors assisted with identifying areas of weakness, and what a tremendous job she has done in a very, very difficult position, as have people with department heads. And that's been very, very much appreciated. The other element that I'd like to express my compliments to and pursue this maybe at a later date is the fact that we're not in the newspaper with contractors through city officials taking personal advantage and use. And that's a compliment to our city and to our city employees. If there is occurrences of that, at this stage my understanding is at best de minimis and it exists at all. And that truly is a compliment that we have a good working environment here with our city auditors, with our oversight committee, and with our city council directing it downwards towards the department heads, and that's been much appreciated. Just for the record, I'd like to express my appreciation to all four councilmen.
May I just add to that, the work that Rad and his staff have done over the past few years, their credibility, their acceptance, certainly, I won't say you're wearing the white hats riding into the departments, but you're certainly better received, and I hope that's the truth, the case, better received today than when we first started out. Orlando, to the manager's office and all the departments, I think they have received this whole function extremely well. And finally, but for the fact that we have this audit committee, and further that although we have two elected officials on it, Jose, Paul, and Mr. Chairman, yourself, I think you've added the credibility that's needed to allow them to do their job internally in a public agency. I think without this committee, we wouldn't be able to or have accomplished some of the wonderful things we've had. So certainly on behalf of the City Council, I'd like to extend our appreciation for what the three of you do with your time and sitting on this committee.
Jose is elected, not to say anything.
Don't say much. I just watch you guys. You do great work, and I've said that from the beginning. It's impressive, and I'm very proud to live in the city and know the city's under well hands and doing a great job. And I agree with them. It's not in the paper. Nothing's going on. It's great. Appreciate it.
This is the moment for those who would like to step up, and if any, if not, this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Terry, thanks for coming by. The audit committee-
Yeah, you do. Your whole staff, everybody does great. I'm very proud. Everything is so good and answers. And